All right, well, let's go now to California and we'll talk with Thomas. Hi, Thomas.
Hey, hey, Pastor Andrew, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Uh, I'm okay by God's help. It's my first time to do the call today. I just
Great.
have a quick two questions for you, and what's your take on this? I know that as a regenerated person who have been born again, we already have the new nature, the new spirit, the new principles, the new identity. But there's a verse in Colossians 3 and 9 and Ephesians 3:22 wherein
Yes.
Paul said that he put off the conversation of the old man. So, so that's the first question. And then the second question is there any difference between the old nature and the old man?
Okay.
Since we don't have two natures if we've been born again. So how come Paul is saying something like the old man still in the new covenant?
Right, right. Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Sure, Thomas. Appreciate it. Yeah, first, there's no difference between old nature and old self. In fact, old nature doesn't appear in the Bible, really, not those two words put together to mean old self. So we commonly say things in Christian jargon. We commonly say things like, old nature, I've got to get rid of my old nature, or my old nature died, or I had a sinful nature. Although the term sinful nature appeared in the NIV for some several decades, my publisher, Zondervan, is the one that put out the NIV Bible, and ultimately, I discussed the issue with them that the original Greek says flesh, it doesn't say spiritual nature or sinful nature. And 3 years later, for whatever reason, their committee met, decided, and then on the new edition, they removed the term sinful nature from most of the instances where it appeared. So, my point is whether it's sinful nature, old nature, new nature, those exact phrases don't really appear in the original language of the Bible. What does appear is old self and new self. Now, what we learned from Romans 6 is that our old self died. Your old self died. You were crucified, buried, and raised to newness of life. So, when it comes to putting off your old self or taking off your old self, that's already happened. So now here comes your question, with regard to both Colossians and Ephesians. If we've already taken off our old self, then why do these passages say to take off our old self? And the short answer is they don't. They don't say that. Let's read carefully in Colossians chapter 3, for example. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and have put on the new self. Both of these are completed works. You have taken off your old self and have put on the new self. Now, you go over to another passage where it says you were taught to put off your old self and taught to put on your new self. And, people think, well, that must be something that I need to do over and over and over again as a Christian. Ephesians 4:22, you were taught to put off your old self, and then it goes on to say put on. So, and be made new in your attitudes. Well, that's not a daily thing that Christians need to do. We don't have to try to find, where's my old self? I can't seem to find my old self. How am I going to put off my old self today? Where's my new self? I got to put on my new self. I can't seem to find it. It's not a daily action. In Ephesians 4, these verbs are what we call infinitives: to put on, to put off. They don't have a time reference to them. They're neutral in regard to time. It's like if I say to dance or to eat or to swim. That's not saying I will swim or I swam yesterday. It's just saying to swim. That's what an infinitive is. So what we see in Ephesians 4 regarding to put off your old self, well, that's an infinitive. It has no time reference. So you have to say, well, then what does Paul mean? Well, backing up, it says you were taught. So that's your past tense marker. You were taught. Past tense. You were taught to put off your old self. So that's why Ephesians and Colossians and Romans 6 are all consistent with one another. Hey, Christian, You don't need to kill yourself. You don't need to put off your old self. You don't need to crucify your old self. All of that has already been done at salvation. You were taught at salvation, hey, here's what you're going to do. You're going to abandon the old self, abandon the old way of life, and be recreated in Christ Jesus for good works. So we don't have to worry about trying to find that new self and put him on every day or anything like that. That's already happened at salvation. Now, are there attitudes that we put on? Absolutely. Do we put on love? Do we put on Christ? Do we put on compassion? Do we put off bitterness? Do we put off envy? Yes, we make those daily attitude choices, but the only reason we can make them is because our new self is already put on. So we have already been crucified, buried, and raised to newness of life. We are already the new creation. We are already the new man. We are already the new self. So, Thomas, I hope that brings clarity to you. And it's also, to me, it's an incredibly powerful truth that you don't have to fix yourself, you don't have to change yourself, you don't have to kill yourself, you don't have to get rid of yourself. There's not half of you that's dirty and sinful and awful. Instead, because of what has been done, we can wake up every day and count ourselves dead to sin and count ourselves alive to God, because that's true of us right now.